as a child. So my parents were unfortunately both addicted to drugs. So if you can imagine growing up in that kind of environment, just all of the things that come along with it. So dealing with mental abuse, physical abuse, dealing with identity crisis, dealing with, security issues, all of those things. And then I had a speech impediment on top of that. So I stuttered horribly. So I didn't like talking out loud to people. If they asked me a question, I wouldn't say anything. And then they would think I was dumb or, deaf or mute because I couldn't say the words. You could ask me how I'm doing, and I would look because in my head, okay, I got to figure out how to say it without
Yeah.
sounding ignorant. So I would just
Hmm.
stand there and stare at them. But then
Yeah.
I'm also a singer. So what I started doing was singing my responses. So they would ask, how am I doing? And I would just sing a song. This girl always walk around here singing, but they didn't know
Right.
that was a way of escape for me. That helped me to communicate. And, even then you ask, did I see any signs of who I am today? It's amazing because number one, with me being a better communicator, I didn't know that that was what I was called to do. I didn't
Hmm.
know that God was going to use me in ministry. I was just a little girl who was trying to live. I was a little girl who didn't want to be abused physically, mentally,
Yeah.
or emotionally. But yet here I am pulling people out of the very things that I was in and had to fight my way out of as a child.
And I feel this the same way, for me. So, I'm lucky that, I had both of my parents.
Mhm.
Both of my parents were not on drugs, thank God for that.
Yes,
But
awesome.
as soon as I stepped outside that door, I
Ooh.
was in, during the crack epidemic, there was five
Yeah,
crack houses on our street. So the activity level is probably very similar
yeah,
to, what you experience. And it gives me a softer heart for the kids in foster care, because those kids were my friends, right? So I was considered a bad kid in dropout prevention.
mhm,
And there was a number of reasons why I was there. And I didn't speak the language. I didn't have a great learning environment.
mhm,
There was violence around me. It was all of these things that
yeah.
kind of added to why I wasn't performing well.
Mhm,
And you said you had a speech impediment. I struggled to learn, I struggled to read, I struggled. And it makes perfect sense, because look at what your environment was.
exactly.
So
And what could
now,
you do
no,
as a
this
child? What could you do? You're the one that's put in that situation.